Ukraine is longing for peace. Europe is longing for peace. The world is saying it doesn't want any war, while Russia is claiming she doesn't want to intervene. Someone here is lying. This is not yet an axiom, but by far not only a hypothesis. I visited the separation line in the Donbass just a couple of days ago. In legal terms, this is line separating Ukraine and temporary occupied territory, but in real terms, this is the line separating peace and the war. The line with a kindergarten on the one hand and the shell flying into it. On the one hand, the school, and on the other hand, the shell flying into the school playground with 30 kids nearby. On the other hand, the kids who are not heading towards NATO, they are heading towards their classrooms. Some of them might be having their physics classes, and with their elementary knowledge of physics, even these kids will know that alleging that it was Ukraine to have shelled these objects is just silly. Other kids might as well be having their math classes. They don't need a calculator to figure out the difference between the total number of shelling in the last 2 days and the number of times Ukraine is mentioned in the Munich Security Report. Yet some kids might be having their history class, and so when they see the shell crater in their playground instead of their school playground, they might start asking questions, has our world completely forgotten the mistakes of the 20th century? Where does the appeasement policy usually leads to? How did we get from the question, what's the point of dying for Danzig, to dozens of millions having to give away their lives for Dunkirk, as well as dozens of other European cities? These are horrific history lessons. With this, I'm simply trying to make sure we have been reading the same textbook so that we are all on the same page about one main question. How did we get to this point in the 21st century where the war is being waged and people are dying in Europe? How come that time-wise it's already longer than World War II? How did we end up in the biggest security crisis since the end of the Cold War? To me, as a president of the country which lost part of its territory, thousands of people, the country surrounded by a 150,000 army with heavy armament and machinery on our borders, to me, this answer is obvious. The security architecture of our world is brittle, it is obsolete. The rules that have been agreed upon by the world dozens of years ago are no longer working. They are neither catching up with new threats nor being effective in overcoming them, just like a cough syrup instead of a good COVID vaccine. This security system is slow and failing us time and time again because of different things: egotism, arrogance, and irresponsibility of countries on the global level. As a result, some countries are committing crimes while others resort to indifference, the indifference that turn them into accomplices. It is symbolic that I'm saying this here. 15 years ago, it was Russian Federation who made the statement here and putting the challenge to the global security. How did the world respond? Appeasement. What do we have as a result? The annexation of the Crimea and aggression against my country at the very least. The UN, which was initially called to safeguard peace and security, cannot protect itself when its own charter being violated as one of the Security Council members annexing the territory of another founding member, while the UN itself is ignoring the Crimean platform, established to deoccupy the Crimea and advocate for the rights of the Crimean Tatars. It was here 3 years ago when Angela Merkel said, "Who can pick up the pieces of the world's puzzle? Only all of us together," she said, to a rush of audible excitement in the room which stood up to applaud. Unfortunately, the collective ovation failed to transform into collective action. So now that the world is talking about the threat of a big war, it begs the question, is there anything left to pick up? The security architecture of Europe and beyond is almost destroyed. It's too late now to talk about fixing it. It's high time for a new one. The mankind did so on 2 occasions, having paid an extensively high price. It is the 2 world wars. We do have a chance to break that trend before it became a trend and build a new system before we pay millions of casualties based on the experience of 2 world wars, without the 3rd one to come in. Here in UN, I already mentioned that there is no such thing as "it is not my war" in the 21st century, that annexation of the Crimea and the war in the Donbass is a blow to the whole world, that this is not about war in Ukraine, this is about the war in Europe. I mentioned this in 2019, 2020, 2021. Will the world be able to hear me in 2022? This is no longer a hypothesis, but not yet an axiom. Why not? Because it requires proof. It requires something more than just tweets and statements in mass media. Action is needed. The world needs this action, not Ukraine. We are going to protect our country with or without support of our partners, be it hundreds pieces of contemporary armament or 5,000 helmets. We equally appreciate the support, but everyone needs to understand that this is not some kind of donation Ukraine should be reminding or begging for. This is not just a broad gesture that Ukraine should be bowing down for. This is your contribution into the European and international security for which Ukraine has been serving as a shield for 8 years now, a reliable shield, holding back one of the largest armies in the world. That same army which is now poised on the Ukrainian, not EU member states' borders. And the missiles were flying into the Mariupol, not the European cities, and thanks God. And after the fights and the destroyed airport in Donetsk, not in Frankfurt, and it is always blazing in the Avdiivka industrial zone, which is being shelled. There it was very hot, not in Murmansk. And none of the countries of Europe know what the military funerals are around the country in all regions, and none of the European leaders knows what is it to regularly meet with the families of the dead soldiers. No matter what, we're going to protect our beautiful land on our borders. Either we have 150,000 or 1 million soldiers of any army. In order to help Ukraine, indeed, we don't need to hear how many of them are there and how many armament they have. We need to hear how many are there of us together. To help Ukraine, we don't need to be reminded of the dates of the plausible intervention. We're going to protect our land on the 16th of February, on the 1st of March, and the 31st of December. We need other dates, much more than these dates. And everyone understands what kind of dates. Tomorrow is the day of commemoration of the Heavenly 100. 8 years ago, Ukrainians have made their choice, and many of them have sacrificed their lives for that. Do you think that 8 years later, Ukraine should keep calling for acknowledgement of our European perspective? Since 2014, Russia is convincing everyone that this was an erroneous path for Ukraine, that no one is waiting for us in Europe. Isn't it Europe that should be saying and proving them wrong? Isn't it Europe who should be saying today that our citizens have a positive attitude towards Ukraine joining the Union? Why are we avoiding this question? Doesn't Ukraine deserve to have direct and frank answers? The same is true about NATO. We are told the doors are open, but so far the strangers are not allowed. If not all members are willing to see us there, or all members don't want to see us there, be honest about it. Open doors are good, but we need open answers, but not the years and years of closed questions. Isn't the right for truth part of our opportunities? And the sooner, the better. The sooner summit in Madrid, for example. peaceful. The Russian Federation is saying that Ukraine wants to join NATO to bring the Crimean back by force. It's good to hear that bring back the Crimea is something that they mentioned their rhetoric, but they didn't read carefully Article 5 of the NATO Charter. The collective actions are for protection, not for attack. The Crimea and the occupied lands of Donbass will come back to Ukraine, but only through peaceful process. Ukraine is consistent about Normandy and Minsk agreement. The foundation is the recognition of the territorial integrity and independence of our state. We want to have diplomatic resolution of the military conflict, exclusively, I would like to emphasize, based on their international law. So what in reality is happening now in Minsk in the peaceful process? 2 years ago, with the presidents of France and Russian Federation and German Chancellor, we agreed about a full-fledged ceasefire, and Ukraine is committed to these agreements, and we are observing them. We keep not responding to the provocations. We're submitting proposals to the Normandy Four and trilateral contact groups, and do we see instead shelling and bullets? Our soldiers are dying, our peaceful population is dying, civil infrastructure being destroyed. The last 2 days have become very symbolic. Massive shelling from the armament prohibited by the Minsk agreement. It's important to allow for the observers for the OSCE to visit. They are being threatened. They're being scared. All humanitarian questions are being blocked. 2 years ago, I've signed into law the unconditional access of humanitarian organizations to the detainees. But on the temporarily occupied territories, they're simply not allowed. After 2 exchange of prisoners, this process has been stalled, and blocked, although Ukraine has been sharing the approved lists. Tortures until the death in the notorious isolation prison in Donetsk now is the symbol of human rights violation. In November, the 2 new crossing points that we opened in Luhansk Oblast have not been put into operation, and we see this as an obstruction under false pretext. And Ukraine is doing its best to push this discussion, for political questions as well. In the TCG, in the Minsk process, we have submitted the proposals and the drafts of law, but everything is blocked and no one is talking about them. Ukraine demands urgently to unblock the negotiation process. At the same time, this does not mean that looking for peace is limited and restricted only by that. We are prepared to look for the keys to end the war in all possible formats, in all possible platforms: Paris, Minsk, Istanbul, Beijing, Barcelona. It doesn't matter where in the world we will agree about the peace in Ukraine. 4 countries will be there, 7 countries will be, or 100 countries. It doesn't matter. The most important, Russia and Ukraine to be there. What is important is the understanding that we need not only us who need peace. The world needs peace. We need to restore peace and integrity in the internationally acknowledged borders. And I hope no one is thinking about Ukraine as a permanent buffer between the Russian Federation and the West. This will never happen. No one allow this to happen. Otherwise, there will be a question: who is next? NATO countries will have to protect each other. I want to believe that North Atlantic Treaty and Article 5 will be more effective than the Budapest Memorandum. For the refusal, the fact that we refused from the 3rd biggest nuclear power, we received the security guarantees. We are no longer have that weapon. Neither do we have the security. We have lost part of our territory, which is bigger in territory than Switzerland, Netherlands, or Belgium. Millions of citizens have been lost. All of that has been lost, but we still have something. We have the right to demand to move from the appeasement policy to ensuring the guarantees of security. Since 2014, 3 times Ukraine has tried to call for consultations for the guarantors of the countries who guaranteed the Budapest Agreement. 3 times, no success. This will be the 4th time today that we're going to do this. As a president, for the first time, but both Ukraine and me will do this the last time. We are initiating under Budapest Memorandum and call for and ask the foreign minister to have this meeting. And if, as a result of this, we're not going to guarantee of defense after this summit, we will think that Budapest Memorandum is not working, and all the package decisions of 1994 have been put in question and compromised. In the nearest weeks, I propose to call the summit of the countries of the Security Council with the participation of Europe, Germany and Turkey to resolve security challenges in Europe and come up with new effective guarantees, security guarantees for Ukraine. The guarantees that we need before we become the members of the Defense Council, being in this gray zone, in a security vacuum, so to speak. What else can we do now? We can continue the effective support of Ukraine and its defense capabilities, providing the European perspective, providing the support as are provided to the candidate countries, and providing specific timelines for Ukraine possible membership in their alliance. We need support for the transformation in our country to create the Stability and Restoration Fund, the Land Lease Program, supplying new armament and equipment to our army, the army which is protecting the whole Europe. An effective preventive sanctions package is what we need to restrain the aggression and the energy integration of the Ukraine into European Union in the times when Nord Stream 2 is being used as a weapon. All these questions require answers. Instead, there is silence. And while this silence persists, there will be no silence in the east of Ukraine, in the east of Europe, and in the whole world. I do hope finally the whole world will understand this and Europe will understand this. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to the countries who have supported Ukraine with their words, with their declaration and specific support. Those who are on our side, on the side of truth, on the side of international law. I'm not calling my friends out by names. I don't want some countries to be ashamed, but this is their business. This is their matter. These are their countries, their karma, and this is their consciousness that they have to look into. Although I don't know how they will be able to explain these actions to the 2 people who were killed and 3 wounded Ukrainian soldiers today, and 3 girls from Kyiv, 10, 6, and 1 years old, who don't have a father any longer. At 6 o'clock in the morning, East European time, when Ukrainian scout officer was killed from the artillery shell prohibited by Minsk. I don't know what he thought about at the last second of his life. He didn't really for sure understand what kind of agenda we need for the meeting to stop the war in the East, but what he knew is the answer to the question that I asked at the very beginning. He very well knows who is lying here. Rest in peace to him and to all those who have died during these years of war in the east of our country. Thank you.